Good evening, Kathy Wilson, 20 Beechwood Drive. I'd like to comment tonight on three sort of broad topics, and in particular relate them to the purpose of doing the master plan review, which you all discussed at, I think it was the first meeting in February. And that purpose is outlined in the 2007 review. It's on page 2. And it talks about the need to review and identify any changes in the assumptions, objectives, and policies that guide development regulations. I note in the margin that Mr. Phillips identified this as the meat of the review. So anyway, one topic I wanted to comment on was economic development. So at one of the recent meetings, Mr. Bobbin raised a question, why do we seem to be assuming more and more? And I thought that was a significant question. It raised the question for me of what is the underlying assumption that we hold as a community regarding the amount and the kind of economic development that we want to encourage over the next 10 years. I think this is a question that's worthy of discussion and clarification on your part. And my sense is that there may be, differing assumptions on this board and in the community, and that it's worthy of discussion and clarification as to what the underlying assumption is. And I would like to see that discussion occur. I'd like to see some clarification, and I'd like to see language in the 2017 review clarifying what that assumption is. The second topic I wanted to comment on is traffic, which is, of course, a huge concern for everyone. I have many particular suggestions in mind that I could make, but when I think about traffic concerns, it's helpful to me to sort of frame it in two broad questions. One would be, what can you do to improve the capacity of the roads to handle the vehicles that are on there? And the second would be, what can you do to decrease the number of vehicles that are on the roads in the first place? And I'd like to see those two things work together to address traffic concerns. The traditional approach, it seems to me, is to focus on the roads. And there are many particulars included in the 2007 document, particular intersections, particular recommendations for lane widening, signals, timing, and so on. And it's interesting to me that I believe almost all of those recommendations have not been enacted. In other words, they were recommended in 2007, and they're still ongoing in 2017. So I would like to see it stated overtly as a matter of policy in the 2017 review that in working to address traffic concerns, the township recognizes the importance of working to decrease the number of vehicles that are on the roads, and that to accomplish that goal, we're committed to being proactive in improving access to alternative modes of transportation, like walking, like biking, like carpools, like public transportation. So one thing I wanted to add as a recommendation to the recommendations that were in here about the particular streets and intersections, I'd like to add a recommendation to look at getting an exit off of 24 someplace between JFK and Columbia. And I know I read that there was at least one meeting of officials from various municipalities, maybe the county, the state, I'm not sure exactly who was there, but I would like to encourage our officials here to be proactive about ensuring that that group meets, continues meeting, and hopefully accomplishes the goal. I think that's a really important change that needs to be made on the roads. As far as you know, there's a ton of different suggestions I could make for decreasing the number of vehicles on the roads. So I just have a few that I'd like to highlight that kind of stand out to me. One is, I don't know if you remember this, this has always resonated with me. This was a couple of years ago at one of the township committee meetings. There was a study presented. It was called the I-24 Corridor Study. It was done by the county in conjunction with the New Jersey Transportation Planning Authority. I thought it was a really well done study, and I've never, it seems to just sort of have gone away. It looked at improving access to the train station in Chatham, Madison, and Morris Township, and there were a number of recommendations for doing that. They had several recommendations I thought were quite interesting. They were specific, and they were low-cost, high-impact recommendations for improving pedestrian and bike access to the train stations. So I happen to have, believe it or not, a copy of this study. I'd be happy to share it. I definitely would encourage it. It's really worth a review, and you know, considering implementing some of the examples of low cost, high impact were signage, striping improvements, short extensions of sidewalks, and adding bike racks at the train station. I like those ideas. I think they're worth considering. Also, in this document, the 2007, there's a paragraph or two identifying particular stretches of sidewalks that are recommended, main corridors, including Madison Avenue, Normandy Parkway, Whippany Road near the Arboretum, Park Avenue near the Blue Gate Farm, Ridgedale Ave, East Hanover between Martin Luther King and Ridgedale, among others. And to my knowledge, I don't believe any of those have been completed. And I would like to highlight my support for doing that. I think it would be a great asset to our community, and I also think it's a way of coming at the traffic issues. I also support improvements in non-automotive transportation between the township and the town. I know a couple years ago there was the James Street sidewalk, which Morris Township did its part. Somehow it sort of fell by the wayside. I would be in favor of resurrecting that project. I think it's an important project, and I would like to see it renegotiated and hopefully completed. Also, I would like to bring up the idea, someone mentioned this to me, I think it's worth looking into. Southgate Parkway has 2 lanes on both sides. That leaves some room to play with, I would think, perhaps, in terms of making it more pedestrian and bike friendly. I'd like to see someone with professional expertise look at that, and I think it would be an asset to our community in terms of adding, you know, pedestrian and bike access there. I also would like to mention, I like Mr. Goldberg's suggestion. I believe it was at one of the Colgate meetings. He talked about encouraging the developer at the Colgate site to work with New Jersey Transit to add a bus stop there. I like that idea. Good way to combine economic benefits for residents. You know, you get a more direct access to transportation to New York City. And it's also a good way to reduce traffic congestion by encouraging public transportation. Let's see, one other recommendation.
Just a question on that point. Is there, Jim, you may know this, isn't there a bus stop on the corner of Martin Luther King and Hanover, right where the Colgate redevelopment would be going on?
I think there is, but I have to double check on that. For some reason, I remember seeing a bus stop sign in that area.
Oh, yeah, the county buses, right?
I don't know what buses stop there, but I recall there being a bus stop there, and I wasn't sure if you were aware of that or if I'm just imagining things, but I think there is. It's a good idea.
It's a good idea. I'm not sure if there is.
It's a good idea.
Also, I would recommend that, to me, there's so many different things that could be brought to bear to reduce traffic. And I would like to recommend that the township do something similar with transportation to what it did with economic development. You know, with the economic development, you created the Economic Development Advisory Committee. I think that's a good idea. I'd like to see the same undertaken for transportation. So, and I like the EDACT an advisory role, but I think that would be a really beneficial thing for the community. Also, my final topic, I'm calling it community visioning. On page 25 of the 2007 review, under general issues, there's the quote, "The master plan should include goals and policies for," and two, I'd like to highlight a proactive strategic vision and a greening of the master plan, and also the need for good communications with the public and the residents of the township. It goes on in the final paragraph of the 2007 review, quote, "The board intends to undertake a community visioning process with respect to its open space and recreation needs and to determine a broader planning context with respect to the greening of the community, its conservation and environmental elements, and the wide variety of active and passive recreation pursuits enumerated in this report and which are desired by its residents." So to my view, my comment here, to my view, it's unfortunate that this recommendation was never implemented. I can understand why. It's a big undertaking. But what this recommendation says to me is that this board recognized 10 years ago the importance of bringing our community together to clarify a shared vision regarding such issues, and in particular as open space. I really think there's a need for, I would definitely support a visioning process regarding open space as well as recreation and environmental concerns. So to me, this remains an important and worthwhile recommendation. I'd like to see it carried out. I'd like to see it included as a recommendation again in this review, and I'd like to see the recommendation carried out as soon as possible, hopefully before the next review. I get it takes time to pull this together, but I guess what I'm advocating is I think this is an important recommendation, and I'm in favor of continuing it. I realize that it is not possible to do this before the end of June, which is the deadline that you all have for, getting the draft.
August 20th.
Okay. Well, I'm sure you couldn't get it done by then either. But my recommendation would be to keep it on the docket and hopefully carry it out anyway, see what the outcomes are, and perhaps, question mark, add some language afterwards to the existing master plan. I really think it's a worthwhile recommendation.
Can you tell me again what page that was on the 2000?
That was on, I believe it was
43.
page 43.
43. 25 and 42. But 43 was the specific recommendation on the open space visioning.
Yes.
Yeah. The very last page.
Okay. Yeah, I got it.
So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, just a question. We in our community have some groups that have been formulated to address some of what Kathy was suggesting. We have the Trails Committee, we have people who are, the recreational advisory groups that we have. So it's my feeling is that there has been an attempt over the years to try to address this notion of visioning for the betterment of the community, but as opposed to more of a, as opposed to a community-wide look, I think what they've done is parse it into pieces that may or may not be meeting the objective, the overall objective vision as listed here, but I believe there has been some attempt to bring the community together to garner comment
Yeah.
on some of the subjects.
That's true. I'm not sure what the board had in mind 10 years ago, but when I think of community visioning, I think of something different than the Trails Committee meeting and talking about it. But I can see the relationship.
Comment, I think to this point, that was one of the reasons I suggested if we would be able to attach as an appendix, I mean, we talked about appendix for historical properties, to attach as an appendix the recreation open space inventory, because there may not be a full appreciation of all of the land that's dedicated to that purpose. And if people were to see that and appreciate it, I think that would go a long way toward an understanding. And the gentleman who remarked about the percentage of open space, we're working hard to get that number right. Because if it is, it's somewhere north of 20%, and it's probably somewhere in the 25% range, but we are, again, going through that calculus. So, there's not all that much left that's not either built out or dedicated to recreational open space or other open space type uses. So that's our context, that's where we start. And from there, what would you envision? It has a lot to do with what areas are coming under redevelopment. So, but I really would like to see that recreational open space inventory referenced and attached. Thank you.
Is there anyone else in the public who has a comment or suggestion?